Greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today, if you don't mind, I would very much like to continue and indeed conclude our journey, our discussion with respect to the recent Criterion Collection release made earlier this year, and it is the box set, the Blu-ray box set, a collector set, which is right here. And it is known as World of Wong. It has been my great honor over the course of a number of videos posted on this particular YouTube channel to have been able to share with you some thoughts and comments and reactions that I have regarding specific aspects of this particular set, collector's set, released by the Criterion Collection earlier this year of 2021. And it's this World of Wong. I've spoken a little bit about each of the films that are included in this particular set, including aspects of the supplements and also presentation points. But now what I'd like to do, if it's okay, is to speak about other aspects of the set overall, including the packaging and presentation design, as well as other points to summarize my overall thoughts and to give a conclusion of sorts with regard to this particular exploration of this set. And so, without further ado, let us speak first of all today about the packaging and design, which is, I think, one of the very interesting and unique aspects of this particular collector's set from Criterion as an example of physical media. And so, as we know, this set, World of Wong, appears in this box set type of fashion here. And so it is a very unique design because it is not this type of slip case cover that we see quite often with physical media releases and sets and collector sets of this kind. But in fact, it has a very unique opening mechanism, which is right here. Now, as you can see, there is, as I say, no slip cover design, but if you look at the back, it has this fold in, fold out mechanism. And so what you do is the fold in, fold out mechanism has a little slot, and one side goes in like this, and so it creates this box shape. But if you undo the flap, you can see that everything opens up and folds out. And then so now looking at it from this angle, it folds out like so. And so what we have is this interesting type of folding out design, which is, I think, very much akin to, like, say, the opening of a flower or the opening of flower petals of a particular, say, flower design of sorts. Now, what this means is, well, first of all, just to complete the discussion point here, as it opens up like so, and we have various, say, depictions of artwork design that adorn every single aspect of this particular packaging, both inside and out. What this means, of course, is that we have to undo or fasten and unfasten this particular box art packaging in order to access the contents that can be found inside, which are two fundamental components, which are right here. And so before we get to the fundamental components here, let me now just speak to this particular design. I am very much of two minds when it comes to this particular design. On the one hand, I think that it is it does have the sense of being a somewhat delicate, and so the idea or the notion of physical media is, of course, or very oftentimes the case, the idea of exploring the films themselves. In order to do that, of course, we need to open and close the casing of the housing in which the particular disc is stored or contained. And so in order therefore to access the discs, you need to open and close this particular mechanism. So every time that happens, of course, the mechanism, just like with all other housing devices, slip cases, slip covers, plastic cases, and the like, every time one opens and closes it, that makes it, how should I put it, that creates another risk, or it creates another occasion for the possibility of, say, not necessarily damage, but wear and tear, known as ordinary wear and tear. And that usually is okay for designs of, say, digipacks or plastic casing and the like. But when you have something like this, and the housing relies upon, say, this sharp-cornered flip case design, then of course what that means is every time one opens and closes it, there is that extra risk perhaps of, say, the possibility of yet further ordinary wear and tear. And so that's something to keep in mind when one is considering this. So that might be, say, a critical aspect of this particular design component. A positive aspect that I see is the fact that it is this very unique design where you have every single corner being adorned with some kind of work of art that is pertaining to the world of Wong Kar-wai, the cinematic world of Wong Kar-wai. And also, this is very unique. This is a very unique way of presenting something in a physical media form. And so in this physical media world where we have slip covers and cases and the like, this becomes a very memorable item for physical media Criterion collection. And so in that way it has its pros and cons, I would say. And plus also, when you have sets like this, you can always have the set maybe, and then if one is concerned about having to constantly open and close it and run the risk of, say, further wear and tear, what one can do is, of course, maybe take the discs themselves out and then place them and store them in separate cases or in separate compartments, and then leave the box as it is. And so that means if one wants to return to the films more often, then one doesn't necessarily need to continually open and close this particular compartment or mechanism, if that is a particular concern. And in fact, what I do for this particular release, and what I have done, in fact, is because I've gone to the discs very, very often, I've watched them on many, many occasions for purposes of this exploration of the set. I have indeed kept the discs out and put them in separate casing in order, as I say, to try to avoid any ordinary wear and tear that comes with this particular case opening. But of course, if you are careful and if you are very delicate with this, as I'm sure you are when it comes to physical media items of this sort, then I think there should be no problem. But again, just something to keep in mind. It is very unique. It is also potentially quite delicate. And so, but as I say, if one can look at it from the viewpoint of a physical media item that is very memorable and one of a kind, then this certainly fills that particular position quite well. This is a very one-of-a-kind type of casing. So there's that, of course. And then we go to the particular components that are included in this particular set. Now, there are two fundamental components. Now, let me go to this one first, which is the compartment which actually houses, or it's designed to house the cases or the discs themselves. And so it opens up like this. And then you have each of the discs that are included in the flaps or fold-outs for this particular component. So it folds out like this, and then you have each of the discs in like so for each of the films. So starting with As Tears Go By, and then leading up to the film 2046. And so, as I say, if you want to keep them in this particular cardboard type of casing. These are Blu-rays, and they're very resilient, and so you can keep them in the particular compartments. What I have done, though, is I have, you can see here the slits that you can put the discs in. However, for me, what I have done is, again, because I go to the films very often, and I wanted to do so in order to, say, prepare certain discussions or to explore the supplements and the like, I have decided to take the discs out and keep them in separate storage cases that I have. So again, it's up to you, whatever you want. And also, as I say too, just to return to my previous comment, this is also to try to avoid having to open and close this particular outer casing to the extent possible. And so that's my own personal choice, but again, you can have your particular discs kept the way you like. And so if you want to keep them in this particular housing compartment, of course, please do so. It is very convenient, and it's divided up by film, as it were. And each particular page has, its own artwork or photo design, which is very much linked to each film, as well as credits and the like. And again, it forms this particular fold-out design motif that we saw carried on, or that we saw introduced inside the outer packaging unit. So that's the first thing that I'd like to show. And then we come to the booklet, this huge or thick and robust booklet. And it has many pages. It has, over 75 pages. And it has pictures, and it has write-ups, and it has a very, very interesting essay. And this is very thick and robust for a number of reasons. So one of those reasons is that it has a number of pictures and a number of write-ups, as I was indicating. So each of the films is given a little write-up, and we have the introduction and the cast and crew and aspects about the presentation, etc. And so that goes for, as I say, the film is from As Tears Go By to 2046. And then we have an essay by John Powers called Like the Most Beautiful Times. And then we have a director's note from Wong himself, which speaks about a certain aspect of the presentations, and I'll get to that momentarily. And then we have write-ups, explanatory notes about the restorations themselves, and then production details about the set overall. So regarding the content of this particular booklet, what I must say is it has this very, the write-ups, I think, are very useful. Because it has a type of great way to introduce each of the films, plus the cast and crew, plus, as I say, each of the films is given a little bit of space. And so it's a very nice way to introduce oneself to each of the films, say prior to watching the film, or maybe immediately after, etc., whatever you prefer. And then we get to the essay, this longer essay by John Powers. And this longer essay, in fact, goes over a lot of terrain. It goes over the general background or history of Wong Kar-wai, leading up to a discussion of each of the films that's included in this particular set. Again, starting from As Tears Go By, and then going into Days of Being Wild, Chungking Express, Fallen Angels, and then Happy Together, In the Mood for Love, and then 2046. And so it gives us a very interesting trajectory and provides a guidance, or provides a pathway, if you will, through this very rich and diverse terrain that is an exploration of the filmography of World of Wong Kar-wai, at least as it's found in this particular Criterion set. It's not a complete filmography, and I'll get to that momentarily, but it is a very robust representation of Wong Kar-wai's filmography, that's for sure. Now, the essay, the John Powers essay, I think is, again, a wonderful thematic exploration of the films, and there's a connectivity that John Powers, I think, himself is providing, which is very helpful and very illuminating. I think it's also very interesting, too, to point out that there are some moments where the essayist, John Powers, does not shy away from being somewhat critical of some of the films. Not all of them, but he does have a certain way of describing, say, maybe a relatively speaking, what might be perceived to be somewhat of a critical reaction to films like, say, Fallen Angels or 2046, in terms of the way in which thematic, at least from the essay's point of view, certain thematic concerns have reached their ultimate conclusions instead of explorations, thus leaving those thematic concerns, explorations, to be artistically, say, exhausted, etc. And so I think in that way it's a very, one might say it's a balanced essay, and others might say it does favor maybe certain films over others. But in any event, I think that's a very fair thing to have, because it is a rich and diverse collection of films that we have contained and included in this particular Criterion set. And so in that way, it's a very interesting choice to have this type of essay included. And I make this point too because I'm reminded of a particular discussion point that we had regarding the film In the Mood for Love, which was included as part of this set. Now, if you recall, in that discussion, we had a comparison with the earlier individual Criterion Blu-ray release. And in that individual Criterion Blu-ray release, there was a discussion with Tony Raines about the specifics of the film. Now, that discussion is not included in this particular set, or with In the Mood for Love, very conspicuously. And so one might speculate as to why that's the case, because after all, there was another soundtrack-related discussion that was carried over from the individual release into this new box set. So why not that other discussion from Tony Raines? And so I'm not sure, but I speculated at the time that perhaps it might have been because there were some points in that Tony Raines discussion where he might be said to have been, or it might be said that he was somewhat, relatively speaking, not overly so, but somewhat, say, critical of the works of Wong that came after In the Mood for Love. So, for example, My Blueberry Nights or 2046, etc. And so, because this was his way of essentially reaffirming the greatness of In the Mood for Love. So it wasn't, as I say, an overly critical look at those films. And he also had a similar type of approach to, say, the film Fallen Angels, which came, of course, earlier. Now, in that speculative discussion, then one might look at that and say maybe a reason why that wasn't included was because of this, maybe relatively speaking, somewhat critical view of some other films. In that case, though, it is very curious that this John Powers essay is included, because, as I say, it does have a slightly, it does look at, or it does acknowledge, certain critical reactions, shall we say, to films, for example, Fallen Angels in 2046. And so in that way, it's a very refreshing and also very curious inclusion as part of this set. But in any event, the John Powers essay does cover a lot of terrain. And so please check it out if you can. I would strongly suggest that you check out the essay, the John Powers essay, after you have seen the films, because it does give certain points, not specifically, but essays of that sort, I think, are very, I would strongly recommend reading that particular essay after having seen all of the films. And so if you're interested, please check out the essay again. It's a very interesting one. And then to continue on with the writings, we have a director's note here, which is on page 68. And it is one page. And this is Wong Kar-wai's words. And he is speaking here about the particular philosophy with regard to this particular set, this new set, the 4K restorations that are included with this. And as we know, the restorations themselves, I think, bring with them specific changes and alterations that have maybe, from certain viewpoints, have been controversial, have been met not necessarily with widespread positive acclaim necessarily, but there have been some areas of criticisms that have been directed towards these particular alterations or changes. And I think that is not an unreasonable position to take, but depending on one's point of view of Wong Kar-wai's works overall, past and present, when they were initially released versus now at this particular point in time, 2021. And so I think in that atmosphere or in that element, we have this director's note. And in this director's note, and I encourage you to read it if you are able to, he does emphasize, Wong Kar-wai does, he does emphasize the idea of change. He does emphasize the idea of a process and the idea of he says, he quotes a saying, "No man ever steps in the same river twice, for it's not the same river and he's not the same man." And so there is this interesting way in this director's note where he is linking the idea of progression of time and space and distance, and how he, as an artist now, is approaching his works and thinking back and trying to recall those philosophies that he had, or he expresses that he had with regard to each of the works, and how he is trying in some way, therefore, again, based on these words, trying to express this feeling or explore these works from this perspective, and then thus these new 4K restorations that we have here. Now, as I say, these are very, in some cases, quite significant changes, significant alterations, and so depending on your viewpoint of the films, you may or may not like these changes. And so that's okay, because you are you, and you can experience the films in the way that you feel comfortable, depending on your viewpoint, your position, your life experience, etc. But here is Wong Kar-wai's statement as to perhaps an explanation or reasoning as to his philosophy to approach this particular point, and giving us these quote-unquote new presentations going forward. So, and as I've tried to indicate in each of the videos on each of the films, I think the changes are specific to each film. I'm not sure if I would necessarily agree with the overall blanket statement that all the changes are good or all the changes are bad, because as I've tried to explain with each of the videos, each film brings with it, or each restoration brings with it, its own set of specific issues, or specific changes or alterations, I should say. And so some of them are they stand out. And they stand out in a way that might be positive or might be negative, again, depending on your point of view. Others are more subtle. And depending, as I say, on that particular viewpoint or that particular structure, then one can look at those changes as being, say, augmenting certain themes that are consistent with the film, or maybe going against or not being congruent with what one might perceive to be the overall or fundamental spirit of the film. So it really depends on the particular film that you're speaking about, or one is speaking about in this. So, but in that spirit, or in that vein, I think that this statement from Wong Kar-wai is a very valuable one indeed. So please check it out if you can. Again, it's one page, and it's relatively speaking it's not so long, but here we have the philosophy that's being expressed by Wong Kar-wai. So again, please check it out if you can. And then in that spirit, we also have on page 72 the information about the restorations, and then from page 73 onwards towards the end, we have information about the production credits for the set itself. And so that's one aspect of the booklet which I wanted to share. The other aspect of the booklet, which is interesting, which is one of the reasons why it is so robust, is the what's known as the French fold binding way in which this book is bound, because we have here the pictures, and we have the way that the book is bound in this way of French binding, or French fold binding. And so we have the folding of the pages outward and then back inward, and that fold is then bound into the binding itself. And so we have, in a sense, folded pages that form the page binding for this. And so that adds a sense of robustness to the particular release itself. And if one is so bold, one can actually look within, say, certain of the folds that we see, and you can see inside the folds the continuation or certain aspects of the artwork. So this is actually an interesting design choice. It means, therefore, that the images, or it means a number of things. First of all, it means that the pages themselves have a certain thickness, and so that gives it, again, a richness and robustness and a sense of presence, which is very good. And then, of course, it presents the artwork in a very fascinating way, or the pictures in a very fascinating way. And if you are so interested, you can sort of take a peek in each of the folds, and you can see that the artwork is indeed continuing on. And indeed, that spirit is the sense too, because in some of the fold-out pages, you have these red pages, and if you look inside, you can pull out some of the you can pull out some goodies here, and you can see these postcard types of pictures that are included. So that's one example. Here's another red page here, and if you look inside, you can pull out this particular postcard-like picture. So you have these goodies and these little hidden gems of artwork that are included both on the outer fold and within the folds themselves. So hidden away in various pockets, the artwork is continued on. So this is a very fascinating aspect. It goes back to the overall packaging design of the outer case, where you have every corner adorned with some kind of artwork or picture, something hidden away, something within the fold or behind the flap, something that would otherwise not be seen unless one looks for it. And so I like that sense. It gives the idea of a sense of exploration or interactivity with the set itself. And so that's a very fascinating aspect. It might not be suitable, or it might not suit everyone, of course, because of course what it means is one has to be even more delicate when one is looking inside to avoid risk of ripping or tearing, etc. So it goes towards that, maybe that overall critical aspect of the set, which is one has to be careful to avoid maybe extended wear and tear. But if one is careful, one can really enjoy this part of the set. And there's a sense of every time one is exploring the set, maybe one can discover something new behind a particular page or in a particular corner here that one didn't see hitherto. So I'm very fascinated with that aspect. Now, another thing too is, or a couple more things, is we do have the set itself, which doesn't include all of the films directed by Wong. It has most of them, but it doesn't have all of them. And so if you are looking for a complete filmography of Wong, this is not the set to get. But it's a good place to start. And it is, of course, it has most of the films, again, on Blu-ray. If you want to get, for instance, Ashes of Time, or if you want to get My Blueberry Nights, or if you want to get The Grand Master, then you will have to go outside of the set elsewhere for those feature films. And so, but those are available, and you can find them relatively easily. I hope anyway. And so if you are interested in a continuation of the Wong journey, then you can look at those films again outside of Criterion. Again, fingers crossed, maybe one day Criterion might be able to release one or more of those films. But in any event, please note that you aren't getting all of the films in this particular set, but you are getting most of them. And indeed, I should say, in that spirit, what's interesting is, if one looks at the films that are included in this particular set, I think the John Powers essay shows a certain way that one can connect the trajectory of these films. And also, one can see that maybe there's a way in which Hong Kong as a city, as a place, and as a character is treated throughout each of the films, starting from As Tears Go By, going into Days of Being Wild, then Chungking Express, Fallen Angels, Happy Together, Happy Together is a film where perhaps Hong Kong is not featured directly, but it is a very significant component of that particular film. And then we have In the Mood for Love, and then 2046. And so that as a character, I think, is another through line that we can see, perhaps connecting each of these films contained within this set. So that's another interesting way to look at this maybe curated Criterion box set in a certain point of view. And last but not least, I should say that I did hear from certain say acquaintances that I have, or other Criterion enthusiasts and fans, about maybe some people had issues with the Blu-rays themselves, skipping or freezing, etc. I should say that for me and this particular set that I have, I looked through each of the discs and the supplements a number of times, and not once did any of the discs that I have skip. There was no skipping, there was no freezing, there was nothing of the sort, and so I was very fortunate like that. I should point out that not with the Wong Kar-wai set, but with another Criterion release from 2021, I did have an issue of skipping and freezing when it came to a very specific chapter, and so I emailed Criterion directly about this. And they were very quick to respond, and they also agreed to send to me, free of charge, a replacement disc. And so I got the replacement disc about, say, 2 or 3 weeks later, something like that. And it played perfectly. And so my suggestion is, if you have any issues with skipping or freezing of any of the discs, say in the World of Wong Kar-wai set, or in any Criterion release for that matter, please contact Criterion directly. You can go to the website. There is an email address that you can find there for support and assistance of that nature. And again, based on my own experience, they are very quick to respond. And I should say too, I live outside of the United States. I live in Japan. So I was not expecting them to respond to me or to agree to help me out here. But they, after I explained the situation, again, not with the Wong Kar-wai set, but with another disc, they were very happy to assist me. So I was a very satisfied customer in that respect. And so we have at last this set, Wong Kar-wai, World of Wong Kar-wai. Oh, and also I should say, Wong Kar-wai with this set, the way that his name is spelled, Wong and then Kar-wai, there is no, at least in the way that is presented in the set, there is no dash or hyphen between Kar and Y. And so it is Wong and then Kar and then Y. And that is the spelling of the name that I think is very, it's I think the way that his name is presented with English alphabet letters, especially recently. There are earlier representations of the name where it has Kar, K-A-R, capital K-A-R, and then dash or hyphen, and then lowercase W-A-I. But here we have capital K-A-R, and then space, and then capital W-A-I. And so that's an interesting way to assert or reassert or represent the name as it's written out in English alphabet. So that is another, I think, way of again, showing us the identity and the existence, or the presence, if you will, of this filmmaker and artist, Wong Kar-wai, through how he's presenting himself and his films, and how this is a mark, or this is a milestone of his particular filmography going forward. And so overall, this is a very fascinating and I think valuable set. It is a set that is not without criticism, I get that, but it is also a very fascinating set, and it is another stop along the way in the world of Wong Kar-wai. So please, if you do have the set, let me know what you think. I would very much love to hear your thoughts and comments about this fascinating release from Criterion, which is called World of Wong Kar-wai. Okay, my friends, so that's it for now. And so until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well, and please keep on watching a lot of great, great movies. Thank you so much, as always, for your time. I very much appreciate it. Stay strong, stay safe, and cheers.